Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for November 23, 2025. Today, we're talking with Hrant Mikaelian, who is an interdisciplinary researcher in Yerevan. Before we get started, everyone, as always, please support us if you can. podcasts.groong.org/donate, be a sustaining member, and always like and subscribe to our channels. Thank you. Well, hello, Hrant. Welcome to the Groong podcast.
Hello, guys. Thank you for having me.
Ողջույն Hrant.
Ողջույն.
Okay, so for some weeks, we've discussed the state of the Ukraine conflict or war or whatever, the SMO, and each week it seems there are new threats to keep Russia at the negotiations table, and proposals always look similar, and at least so far they have led to nowhere. Last week it was tomahawks versus continuing negotiations. This week it's a 28-point plan offering international monitoring of ceasefire lines, prisoner exchange mechanism, and limits on Ukraine's future force posture. And in return, Russia would receive a formal freeze on NATO membership for Ukraine and for a defined period of time, so not forever, and also a structured path for lifting Western sanctions. Recognition of Russia's de facto continued control of Crimea, and guarantees that any remaining disputes would be managed through negotiations rather than military force. So on top of that, just today, as a result of discussions between high-level delegations between the United States and Ukraine, that 28-point plan was reduced to 19 points, and there's still no agreement from Ukraine fully on it. And we should remember previous efforts by the West to freeze the conflict. We're talking about the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements, and only for Western leaders to finally admit that this was all a ploy to buy Ukraine more time to get ready for war. So, Hrant, is this new 28-point plan or 19-point plan essentially like a Minsk III, in your opinion?
Well, the 19-point plan I haven't seen yet, so on that I cannot comment, but I've seen 28-point plan issued by US and 24 points issued by EU. So the EU document is completely one-sided and intended to prevent the negotiations because obviously forcing Russia to capitulate in current situation is not adequate. Regarding the US document seems to be, kind of a compromise between US and Russia, because it has some points which include Russia's concerns and some points of American concerns, and obviously by far not completely is beneficial for Russia. It is completely beneficial for US though, and definitely not completely beneficial for Ukraine. Although I think that in current stage, the US, when US is observing, Ukraine losing on the battleground, this is a damage control, because, if you are trying to sell your stock before it collapses, you need to do it until it has some price. So I think it's the last time when you can, get something in exchange, because Ukraine's front lines are collapsing very quickly the last months, and Russia has had highest gains since March 2022 in November this year, and it is accelerating. So the Russia strategy of war of attrition has finally started bringing the results. Ukraine has lost most of its potential, and now it's currently bringing Russia the results on the battleground. Russia is attacking simultaneously on 6 towns, which has never occurred before. So it is, as strong as ever, and now US has to stop it somehow. So this plan emerged, and the next question is, who will be responsible for the failed negotiations? Because in reality, neither Russia...
It will fail. Are you saying that there is no chance it will succeed?
I don't see it. So in reality, either either Russia or Ukraine would ultimately, bring it to failure, and both want the counterpart to do it. But we see that Ukraine is doing it on its side, because all of the Ukrainian major speakers have already stated that this plan is unacceptable, and then they started negotiating with EU leaders to change the plan, while Donald Trump has demanded to sign the current version of the plan. So now they are changing it. So obviously we can see that that it's not going to work, because this plan was a least compromise which Russia could theoretically could agree, and less than that, definitely Russia will not agree. The war will continue, and the more death and destruction will follow. So that's what I see here. And by the way, this plan, why I'm saying that this is beneficial only for the United States, because yeah, Ukraine loses some territories, but so does Russia, because Russia also gives up territories in Dnipropetrovsk province, in Kharkov and Sumy province, which it controls right now, and those are not very small. So that's one thing. Another thing, Russia agrees on many terms which it had not agreed before, and the term of demilitarization with maintaining 600,000 Ukrainian troops is not possible, because Ukrainian army before Russian invasion was 250,000 troops. So how can you demilitarize Ukraine with gaining more army ultimately? So I think this is, pro-US plan, only pro-US plan. No one can say this is pro-Russian plan. Yeah, but obviously EU and Ukraine are not very happy about it.
So if it's a pro-US plan, does this mean that even Russia is not fully signed off on it? And what is the US strategy? Because I'm sure US policymakers are not dumb, as some people like to think. What is their goal in proposing this plan if it's doomed for failure?
Okay, now, first of all, on Russia's response. The very same evening when this plan was published and announced, the Russian leader Putin has appeared in the military shirt and in a meeting with his top military officials, and they were telling him that they have great advances here and there. And he was very firm, saying that we have upper hand on the battleground. So this is first reaction of Russia. The second reaction came on the next day when Putin said that, yes, this is like a starting point for the negotiations. So he did not reject the plan, but he said that he is planning to renegotiate point by point. Now, regarding the US, we have seen how US is going to use Russian funds, gain some more income, revenue, and so on. So lots of things regarding Trump is about that. That's obvious. But why US is negotiating here at all? Because first of all, this war from the beginning was a mistake, and Trump admits it, and he blames Biden for it. But anyway, US is in this situation, and Mark Rubio has agreed that this is a proxy war. So it is draining US resources. Moreover, if Ukraine is losing, and which is a fact in my opinion, then if Ukraine loses and US is Ukraine's ally, this means that US is losing as well. So now US tries, to leave Ukraine losing, but not to lose itself. So in the end, US needs to be in the winner's camp, not in the loser's camp, as it always did. The First World War, Second World War, US always arrived to the winner's camp. So now Trump wants to create a winner's camp where first and the most important person will be himself. And the second goal is that if he will continue draining resources here and in the Middle East, he will not be able to contain China. And since this is a long-term goal, they need to acquire resources. Moreover, there is a discussion about economic further, crisis in the US and in the global economy, especially regarding the AI bubble, which is most likely very big and most likely it will burst at some point, maybe not very distant future, especially the debt crisis. So, in these cases, you need to leave all the problems behind and to reboot lots of policies. And this is part of that. And if Trump is successful there, then he will show to everyone that his agenda is working while Democrats are failing. So it's also about the future political power in the United States. But if he fails, this will mean that Democrats were right and that Russia is not, adequate partner, and that their policy was right then. You should not elect Trump, and so on and so forth. So that's also about the power in the United States, especially given that the next election will take place in 12 months.
Hrant, from Ukraine, let's turn to Central Asia because it's been a pretty robust geopolitical month for Kazakhstan already, which is a member of the Organization of Turkic States and a close partner with Azerbaijan. And Kazakhstan is also a member of the CIS and the CSTO. First, on November 7, Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev went to the United States. He met with Trump in the White House, signed billions of dollars worth of agreements, and formally joined the Abraham Accords. And following that, Tokayev went to Moscow and signed a deep strategic agreement with Putin. But nothing would be complete, of course, without meeting the one and only Nikol Pashinyan of Armenia on his official visit to Astana last week. Pashinyan made it a point to thank Tokayev for a shipment of wheat through Kazakhstan and then to Azerbaijan and then to Georgia and from there to Armenia, all in the spirit of diversification of the Armenian economy. Tokayev, whose country tacitly supported Azerbaijan in the 2020 Artsakh war, bestowed on Pashinyan Kazakhstan's highest honor.
Was it the Golden Borat?
Close, Hovik. It was actually called the Order of the Golden Borat.
No, Golden.
It's actually called the Order of the Golden Eagle. So let's talk a little bit about Kazakhstan a little bit. Kazakhstan seems to be upping its political game. They appear to be playing with Russia, China, the United States, all of the West, and they're doing this well. How do you assess their achievements so far? How are they managing to balance all of these superpowers?
Well, Kazakhstan is in reality trying to have a diverse foreign policy, and it's rather successful, but it has lots of resources to do so, because on one hand they have lots of oil, and on another hand they have lots of uranium and also a big territory, small population though, but very well located, not very close to major conflict areas, but not so far that you don't have any connection. So it's somehow in a very good shape right now, Kazakhstan. I have been there a couple of months ago and have seen how fast this country is developing. So with small population and lots of resources, you can do a lot, and they are rather effective at that. Although, of course, there is also some popular discontent as well, especially among the poor. But anyway, Kazakhstan is quickly developing. Now, regarding the foreign policy, I think that first of all, the Central Asian leaders have some extent of deficit of legitimacy, because they all are authoritarian leaders, and the West, always questions any leader's legitimacy, especially the authoritarian leader's legitimacy. And while Trump is a transactional president, it's very easy to deal with him, especially pleasing him with good words or negotiating some economic agreements, which Kazakhstan and other Central Asian states, especially Uzbekistan, have done. So in their view, they have achieved, to some extent, legitimization. Also, I can remember how several months ago, Central Asian presidents have had a meeting with French leader, and also they have approved the Cyprus territorial integrity, which is not in line with Turkish foreign policy, which shows that they are not very happy about Turkish pan-Turkism and interventionism into Central Asia. Also, they don't reject it. So for Central Asian leaders and countries overall, the so-called pan-Turkist policy of Turkey is not just about pan-Turkism, but more it's a path towards the West, towards the Western markets, technologies, and the development, let's say. So Turkey is kind of mediator in their view. And of course, given that Turkey is strategically located, it tries to utilize its location to pursue its own political agenda, which is, in my view, very dangerous because Turkey wants to militarize Central Asia and militarize it furthermost against Russia. And UK is also in the game, and US as well. That is why US is brokering the so-called trip, or let's be honest, it is so-called Zangezur corridor.
Zangezur corridor.
It is the same. Although Pashinyan says it's not the same, yes, the name is not the same, but essentially it is the same because it is not Armenian controlled. And I think, moreover, I think that even US will not control it because Turks were dreaming about Zangezur corridor since 1920, and they had, input it into Alexandropol agreement, and then many statements and so on. And then the 2020 trilateral agreement, and then Russia was in, so they had the goal to leave Russia out. It was successfully fulfilled with help of EU, US, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And now the next goal would be, I'm sure, to keep US out of that as well, because otherwise it will not be a corridor. It will be not that corridor which Turks want. Now, regarding Kazakhstani reaction, Kazakh leader has gave the same golden eagle to Ilham Aliyev for the trip, and now he gave it to Pashinyan because he also, on his part, he has committed to this corridor as well.
Hrant, what's the significance of Kazakhstan joining the Abraham Accords?
Yeah, that's a sign of that's one of the transactions because Kazakhstani elite needs legitimization as they have connections in the UK, but it's rather one-sided now with the US, and then with France, and then with Russia, and then with China, and so they don't care much about Palestine. They are far away. The Kazakh leader is rather secular, and Kazakh authorities are rather secular. Moreover, they are afraid of Islamism in their country. So that's one part of the deal, and another, getting better negotiation position with the US. It is important for US. It is very important for Trump because the Abraham Accord, especially after 2023, became very difficult to fulfill. And now another Muslim country, though it's very far away, but joins it.
So what's the significance of Kazakhstan overall for Armenia? Why all this strategic partnership and friendship and giant state feeding of Pashinyan? What's going on?
Well, theoretically, there could be lots of areas of cooperation, although not very wide because, there are no common borders and not very much of potential, but some areas of cooperation are obviously present. Although, as of now, the platform for the agreement and for increased level of relations is, Armenia's pro-Turkish policy, let's be honest. So it's been done in this frame. The very same way as Armenia has recognized Palestine and was recognized by Pakistan. But again, I'm sure that Armenia and Kazakhstan can have separate and rather deep relations agenda, but now it's about so-called corridor.
Yeah. Not last week, but earlier this month, Armenia received a shipment of Russian wheat through Kazakhstan, then Azerbaijan, then Georgia, and then eventually to Armenia. the Pashinyan media made a spectacle of it, calling it historic. One would think that Armenia was starving and this train arrived just in time to save Armenia. So we want to talk about that, the shipment or the beginning of shipments of wheat from Kazakhstan through Azerbaijan. What is the significance of this? And is this really unblocking of communications like the Pashinyan media presents it? And how did Armenia receive its wheat before? Or maybe we were eating rice. I'm not sure.
Earlier, we were talking about what kind of grain got through, and it was, I think we were discussing it was either grade 3 or grade 4 wheat that could be used for animal feed, essentially. Was that possibly because the government did not trust that this thing coming through Azerbaijan would not be mucked with, and they felt like they could not eat it? And then I think you said civil contract people actually made a spectacle out of eating this stuff and saying it was safe and it was good.
I think the Minister of Economy promised that he would eat that wheat. So yeah, but going back to my question, Hrant, how would you assess this beginning of shipments from Kazakhstan? And is it going to be only wheat? What else can we receive through Kazakhstan?
Yeah, it was fourth grade cattle feed. And in the end, we learned that it was ordered for Samvel Alexanyan to somehow find some wheat to bring to Armenia. So Pashinyan had very few time. Most likely, when Aliyev announced that he is ready to, organize some kind of transit, although not direct, but through Georgia, then Pashinyan decided to show this progress not on the paper, but in reality, because he desperately needs to show the results to the public, which are absent. I mean, yeah, there are lots of results for Azerbaijan, but none for Armenia. And this very minor result for Armenia he needed to show. So he organized some shipment of fourth grade wheat to Armenia in a very short term. And initially I thought it will be shipped through Caspian Sea to Baku, and then through Baku, through Azerbaijan to Georgia, and then to Armenia. But then I found out that it was shipped through Russia, and
from Kazakhstan
I
to
mean,
Russia, from Russia
I
to
didn't
Kazakhstan.
understand what's the sense in this diversification, because even without Azerbaijan, Kazakh wheat was present in Armenia. I mean, it is very hard to find any sense in that. Yeah, of course. Besides, you can show that yes, through Azerbaijan now something can pass. I mean, it is nonsense, and I'll try to show why it is nonsense. First, this shows that Azerbaijan considers that any good which can end up in Armenia is subject to be stopped in Azerbaijan or to be released. So Azerbaijan controls overall flow, which means today they let it, tomorrow they stop it, and the next day they do something else. So it means that Azerbaijan is not an adequate partner, but they have their hand on pulse, so they control everything. That's what Aliyev has shown. Now, what Pashinyan has shown, we have another road, which is in fact not another road, because, if you are bringing Kazakhstan to Russia, to Azerbaijan, to Georgia, then if you bring from Kazakhstan to Russia, then to Georgia, there is no difference, except you pay more to Azerbaijan. I mean, in reality, this is nonsense. But anyway, that's what it is. And, it was a PR event, nothing else. Yeah, spectacle, as you said.
Hrant, on November 12th, so that's also 2 weeks ago, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Agency, SVR, posted an announcement on its website titled The Kiss of Yerevan, with the obvious reference to the Kiss of Judas. And in that announcement, it alleges that Armenia intends to stop buying grain from Russia and instead purchase more expensive grain from Ukraine using financial support from the European Union. And by doing so, Armenia is said to be committing betrayal of Russia and severing another tie to Moscow for political reasons. Of course, Pashinyan denied this as nonsense, but of course, we remember how Pashinyan met Macron and von der Leyen in Europe last year and discussed the stupendous idea of switching every Armenian from eating wheat to rice, and they actually treated it with utmost seriousness. So, what do you make of this announcement from the SVR and this back and forth between Pashinyan and Pashinyan's response, essentially?
First, regarding betrayal, I don't remember Armenia committed, its blood to buy wheat only from Russia. I mean, you cannot betray in this case. That's on one hand. Yeah. Second, regarding the EU involvement, if EU is pushing Armenia, and if Armenian government is a subject to this foreign political pressure, which I'm sure to some extent it is, then it is not a sovereign decision of Armenia. I think it is very important to understand. I mean, in this case, it's not about Yerevan, it's about Brussels. And Russia has to deal with Brussels in this case. And I don't know from where the Russian foreign intelligence got this information, but from Armenian authorities' policies, I can see that, yes, they are trying to replace Russian wheat and remove it from markets. And I can remember how a year ago, head of Security Council of Armenia was speaking that, yeah, we need to replace wheat with rice, which obviously shows the intention to replace Russian wheat. But anyway, I think all of this is nonsense because, it's the same discussion as replacing Russian oil and gas, which is very hard to do because on the price side and on the many convenience and so on, it's not easily replaceable. If EU wants to pay Ukraine additional amount so that Armenia pays the same, I think at this stage it does not make any significant difference for Armenia. And if EU wants to pay, let it do so. I don't see here that big deal as Russia does. Maybe if EU stops paying, Armenia will start buying from Russia again. I mean, if Russian proposal is good in terms of price. So I don't see here a big deal, but obviously Armenian government is doing, not diversification as Kazakhstan, but a U-turn from Russia towards the West, but being pushed by the West, so being in kind of forced, and also using the connection with Armenian elite, current political elite. So yes, it shows some reality, but not all.
Well, it's a little hard to separate the wheat from the chaff in that news. Let's move on to domestic politics here. Hrant, as a result of gerrymandering and many other forms of administrative resources, Civil Contract was able to squeeze a victory in the Vagharshapat elections 2 weeks ago. What is your take on these elections? Does it set a precedent or predict what's going to happen in the parliamentary elections in June of 2026?
Yeah, it was a very interesting case because in reality, since 2018, the current government never made a large-scale fraud in elections until Vagharshapat elections. And it did not pass unnoticed. Everyone noticed it. And first was gerrymandering, as you said, and then there was administrative resource and possibly some falsifications, some fraud, and so on. So I've tried to assess the extent of real vote, and the vote for the ruling party would be most likely, based on the statistical data which was published, if we exclude, excessive votes in the community villages, most likely they would gain some 42 to 43% of votes instead of 48.6. So some 3,300 votes out of 15,300 votes, which they got, are most likely a result of fraud. And this is not surprising because the party which Pashinyan is making fraud in during elections in his own party, and it is to be expected that he will start fraud in the national elections or in the local elections. But I see it in the wider context of, Pashinyan's try to eliminate the local government in Armenia. So three opposition mayors in which have been elected in Armenia are now arrested. One have been killed. And many elections have been manipulated the other way. For example, when the opposition mayor was elected, and then the authorities, using brutal police force, removed them from the office and installed their own. There have been 3 cases like that previously. So what we see here is the try, and obviously successful try, if we understand under success that government was able to physically realize it, try to eliminate the independent local governance in Armenia, which is now fulfilled. Now, regarding the election itself, we could see that the participation rate in the villages was inadequately high. In some villages, the authorities have received 80% of votes and so on. So,
Wow.
fraud is more or less obvious here. While in many of Vagharshapat town precincts, they got, some 33 to 36% of votes. So, what is also important, that there was no competition in reality, because many of opposition parties did not participate, and the competition was weak. So it's not only authorities to blame for that, but also opposition. And authorities also implemented, a very calculated strategy compared to Gyumri, because they were talking that it's purely a local thing. They did not let Pashinyan to arrive to Echmiadzin to have a rally there, because Argishti Mekhakian, who was representative and who was, candidate of authorities to be elected as a mayor, he said that it will harm the civil contract party in this election. So this election was completely, faced with local agenda, streets, transport, and so on.
Family
Poverty.
ties. Yeah.
Yeah.
Village
But at the same time,
loyalties.
the very same day, when Mekhakian was elected, Pashinyan has announced that this election shows that the people of Vagharshapat want him to continue attack on Armenian church.
He was very quick to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, complete nonsense. But he's trying to use any occasion to attack Armenian church.
I'm still concerned that this could be a precedent or a pattern for what's going to happen during the 2026 elections. And Hrant, while many political forces are gearing up for the parliamentary elections, the RPA, the Republican Party of Armenia, is taking charge of the effort to remove Pashinyan with a vote of no confidence. And most people call this just impeachment, both in Armenian and in English. The impeachment candidate is David Hambartsumyan, who was, where is he? Yes, anyone?
Aspet, that's an easy question, Aspet. If you're an opposition member, then your true place is in jail.
He's in jail.
And he was jailed
That's
2 weeks ago.
David Hambartsumyan, the possible candidate for replacing Pashinyan, is in jail. And perhaps taking charge is a little too generous a word, since the Republican Party of Armenia is they haven't successfully convinced anyone to sign on board. Although the Hayastan Dashing people are on board, they haven't been able to get the independent MPs on board, and they don't even have anyone from the large number of required votes from civil contract to defect over. Now, we discussed this a couple of episodes ago, actually, the previous episode, 487, I think, with Haik Mamijanian from the RPA. He said that the key to the process is going to be street protests. He said that the impeachment process has to be backed by street action to convince the civil contract members to sign on. We're in the winter months. And it's very cold in Yerevan. Is it fair to say that it's not an optimal time for street protests right now?
The weather is not a major condition right now not to have a street protest. Last year, because of inadequate actions of opposition, because of failures of opposition, including the RPA, Pashinyan got stronger. In the beginning of the year, his approval rating was somewhere around 32%, and now it has grown up to 40. So what does it give us?
But Hrant, before that, you said 40%, but we're reading MPG polls that say, 12%, 17%. Are you talking about when, you take out the, non-committed voters?
It's not voter intention.
Okay.
It is a prime minister approval rate, So if you ask people, do you approve prime minister? 32% a year ago, almost a year ago, in the beginning of 2025, around 32% would say they approve, around 60% would say they disapprove, and some people would say they are undecided. Maybe 55 or 57 were disapproving anyway. But after trip announcement and the large-scale propaganda campaign by authorities, and while opposition was silenced, Pashinyan got his approval rate increased. That's one instance. Another is that almost whole 2025 passed under, competition or even clash between RPA and the Hayastan bloc, which means that they were fighting each other instead of fighting Pashinyan, from which Pashinyan benefited a lot, because since the beginning of the year, both Hayastan bloc and the Republican Party have decreased their approval rates. So what we can observe here is that because of their weak policies or non-well calculated policies, I think Pashinyan is now stronger than a year ago. That's first and very important point. And he was able to overcome the providing Azerbaijan with Zangezur corridor, which he would not be able to do so if not, weakness of opposition. Of course, he jailed some opposition leaders back then, but, not all of them. So opposition could have had a counter campaign to show the problems with this trip corridor, but they did not, which led Pashinyan to increase his approval rate significantly. And also electoral vote intention as well, because there you can also see an increase. Now, that's the problem. So if Republican Party announces the protest actions right now, not very many people will attend. That's a big problem. And regarding the impeachment process, if you ask 100 people in the streets in Armenia, what is it all about? Almost nobody will be able to tell you. I mean, Republican Party got 5% of votes during the last two elections, but even 5% does not support this agenda. Not because they don't support the impeachment of Pashinyan, but because they don't understand the essence of the current process, which is very important, because if we look at how many representatives of Republican Party, of course, I don't mean Hrant Mikaelian and several other prominent members, but many low-level propagandists of the party were showing that this process is directed against the Hayastan bloc, because they were saying that, oh, you see, we are starting impeachment and Hayastan bloc is not joining us, and so on and so forth. So the whole narrative was about, who is the leader in the opposition.
Hrant, but Hayastan Dashing has jumped on board. Hayastan Dashing has jumped on board at this point.
Yes. Ultimately, yes.
Yes. So when we were talking with Mamijanian, he was basically saying that impeachment and the elections are two threads that go together in parallel. But the issue that they were seeing was a lack of resources to push forward with both. Do you really think that this is the issue facing the opposition, that they don't have enough resources, or is it what do you think it is?
Well, of course, they know their resources better than me, but in my view, they have more resources than they think, first, and second, they are not very efficient in utilization of their resources in the political field. So their technologies are outdated, And if you look at the government and at the civil contract party, at Pashinyan, how he is communicating with the people, it's not only about money and resources. Okay, he has blog. He is communicating with people on a daily basis. Robert Kocharan, on his side, is communicating with people once in 2 years. Do you need lots of resources to communicate with people at least weekly? I don't think so. So it's not only about resources, it's about will, it's about understanding, it's about dedication, and it's about understanding what are you planning to do. And as of now, opposition is in some way afraid of taking power, from what I see, because they are afraid that if they take power and then Azerbaijan and Turkey will attack, they will be blamed for that. So they are, kind of maintaining the status quo.
Biding their time, right?
Yeah, but you cannot do that forever. But yet they are doing the same for the last several years.
Okay, Hrant, so let's switching topics. Despite the Stockholm Arbitration Court's binding decision, which ruled that Armenia must freeze its actions against the electric networks of Armenia, Armenia's regulatory agency, the Public Services Regulatory Commission, PSRC, revoked the distribution license for electricity from the electric networks of Armenia on November 18. That was just last week. Because, who cares about international legal commitments when you have von der Leyen on your side and you're destined to be a thorn on Putin's side? But that's beside the point. We should remember that Samvel Karapetyan is the owner of the electric networks through Tashir Group, and he is also currently in jail for simply saying, we will defend the church. And according to also legal agreements that were deliberately rushed through parliament and by Pashinyan this summer, showing his intention to take over the electric networks, if the ENA loses its license, then the power grid must be recognized as publicly overriding interest, or maybe it's translated to eminent domain in English. Does this mean that this deal is done? The power grid is now seized from Samvel Karapetyan?
Well, as of now, they are discussing reselling it to someone, maybe some foreign investor, maybe domestic investor, which will be, pro-government, of course. And I don't remember this scale of, seizure of property in Armenia. You had several cases under this government, under previous governments, but none of the deals have exceeded $30 million. This time it's about, you can speak about $600 or $700 million or even more. I mean, whenever the power changes in Armenia, this will be subject of, complete withdrawal of the terms. And I think this is a big deal. But at the same time, this government now tries to use all its resources in favor of itself, even in economic field. There are even discussions of growing network of Pashinyan's family supermarket, 88, and then they are trying to capture the Yerevan city network and lots of other fields. So they have been talking about monopolization during previous governments, but they are doing lots of similar stuff in cigarettes, in lots of other stuff. So basically what we are observing is that it's redistribution of wealth in the country. And this thing is very important for Pashinyan because electrical networks of Armenia have lots of employees. And he was afraid that Samvel Karapetyan, the day he has the political ambitions, he will be, utilizing this resource in favor of himself, for example, to force his employees to protest in the streets, which I don't think he would do, but that's Pashinyan's fear. So I think his driving motive was that, because Samvel Karapetyan on his side said that he is not gaining anything out of this electrical network. He is spending much more.
Hrant, a quick question. If the Stockholm decision went against Armenia, what investor would actually invest money in buying this company from basically Pashinyan's government? Have you heard anything about what investor groups might be interested?
Well, it could be Khachatur Sukyasyan, or so-called Gurzo. That's one possible scenario. Another possible scenario would be, dividing it into pieces and selling it to different investors. Another possible scenario would be to leave it under, state control, or even not even state control, but it's prime minister office control. The same thing they did with the Zangezur copper molybdenum combinate. That's another thing. So, and the next would be, giving to some foreign investor for half or a third of price.
Are the news that the foreign investors, there was some news about Turkish investors. Is there any truth to those reports?
Well, I have not seen any proofs, but I would not be surprised. For a minute, I would not be surprised. And that is very good thing for Pashinyan, because even if he loses power, go and grab it from Turks, and Turkey will start using its, military political pressure against Armenia, and he will show it as, this is how you treat Turkey, that's what you get, and so on and so forth. So anything Turkey does against Armenia plays in favor of Pashinyan. Anything against Armenia, he uses for his power. That's his modus vivendi for the last 7 years. And when he speaks about Armenia and Armenians, he always says you, not we. That's what he says. And giving it to Turkey for him would be beneficial. But I mean, on one hand, Turks would also not be ready to pay for that. I don't think Turks are ready to make any investments in Armenia. Most likely they would, they would grab something for free, but not pay for anything. That's what I see.
For a few minutes, let's talk about the issue of political prisoners in Armenia. This week, we saw the continued persecution and extension of pretrial detentions for political prisoners. First of all, Samvel Karapetyan's pretrial detention was extended by 2 months. I think he has been serving 5 months already. Lydia Mantasyan, the only female political prisoner, had her pretrial detention also extended by 3 months. She has also been in detention for 5 months. And of course, last week we already covered the arrest and the horrible way that Narek Samsonyan and Vazgen Sagatelian were just basically arrested by the National Security Service and put in pretrial detention. So for our listeners who may just be tuning into these issues, why are these cases treated as criminal matters to begin with rather than political disagreements or political speech? Samvel Karapetyan just said, we're going to protect the church our way. How is that a criminal offense? How is it justified by the, internationally?
Well, those are obviously political cases, and they are not even treated like criminal cases, I would say, because, for example, Samvel Karapetyan is being convicted for coup d'etat. That's official, article there. That's what they blame him for. This is political case. But for foreign-sponsored human rights defenders, this is a good case, because if you can defend the rights of those who are pro-Western, but you cannot defend the rights of those who are not pro-Western. So if they are not pro-Western, if they are representatives of Armenian Church, 3 archbishops, several priests, many opposition representatives, and so on and so forth are in jail. But no one among these paid human rights defenders, no one is making a statement condemning it, condemning the government. EU is supporting the government. I can remember how a year ago, after the crackdown on opposition, where several people were injured, the EU has made a statement that at least it's better than 2008, so we support the government, we support democracy, and so on. So by supporting democracy in Armenia, democracy is pejorative for the pro-Western. So by supporting pro-Western regime in Armenia, they support authoritarianism in Armenia, because the EU is creating a borderline against Russia in this region, against Russia and Iran, and as French President Macron in the beginning of 2024 said that Armenia is a buffer state for us against Russian influence. That's what he said. So that's their approach. And if for creating a buffer state against Russian influence, you need to install an authoritarian government, you need to destroy all human rights, they will do it. The same way they did in Ukraine, the same way they did it in Moldova, and during Saakashvili era in Georgia, the same way they are doing it here. So that is it. Yeah, it's a kind of neo-colonial approach, creating a buffer state against their geopolitical rivals, yet speaking about democracy and destroying democracy at the same time. That's what they do.
All right. Thank you, Hrant. Let's be done with our topics. Let me ask each of you if there's something on your mind you want to share with our listeners. Hovik, go first.
I don't have much other than I heard that Zareh Sinanyan, someone who I knew once, and who I was, who I consider a friend, is going to be visiting the US sometime in the next few weeks, along with Moldova, of all places. He has been Pashinyan's tool, and not a very sharp one at that, I would say, but to re-engineer the diaspora and create a so-called new diaspora that is free of anything binding Armenia to its identity of Christianity, genocide remembrance, and nationhood. So, if anyone knows, or if anyone is invited to one of his private engagements with handpicked audiences, I hope you can pose some interesting questions if you, even if you don't fully agree with us, but ask him what is the meaning of attacking the church, because he recently, brazenly said that there are no political prisoners in Armenia. And he said that the church and the everyone who's in jail is associated with Russia, as if that is a death sentence. So yeah, I hope that if there's anyone listening to us, maybe you can pose a few hard questions to Zareh Sinanyan. I'm sure though that his audience will be pretty limited and handcrafted to make sure that he doesn't get any questions at all that would inconvenience him.
Okay. Hrant, is something on your mind you'd like to share?
Yeah, a couple of things. Yeah, this is a widespread Western narrative, which is, whatever is not pro-Western in Armenia is associated with Russia, therefore should be destroyed. We have seen an ugly article written by Thomas de Waal, British journalist, for Carnegie Endowment, which was about the geopolitical context of Armenian elections. And the same story, Russia is intervening, the Armenian church is pro-Russian, Samuel Karapetyan is pro-Russian, here and there, everyone is pro-Russian, so the government is trying to preserve democracy by cracking down. All the same bullshit we hear every day. That's, I want us to stay focused on that, and I want us to, to reject this type of fake narratives. And another thing which I want to share is that the last week, Azerbaijan destroyed 2-century-old Shia mosque in Artsakh, which is noteworthy because previously Azerbaijan only destroyed Armenian churches, cemeteries, and khachkars, and now they destroyed Shia mosque. Although it was a small village, rural, Shia mosque, but still it's a historical landmark for that small area. And what is interesting here is, in my view, that first of all, Aliyev with this step is, erasing Artsakh completely. It's not about Christian Muslim anymore. It's about, building completely different thing out of Artsakh. And that Aliyev has always spoken about Shushi as a historical heart of Azerbaijan and so on and so forth. But now Aliyev is building new big blocks there instead of reconstructing the building
Yeah.
was destroyed by him in 2020 and by his father in 1992. But anyway, that's one side. Another thing is that under guidance of Turkey, Azerbaijan is effectively becoming or sliding towards Sunni Islam instead of Shia Islam, which was traditional for Azerbaijan. And this is also a sign of that, I think, which is also important to see because, you know, many regard Azerbaijan still as a Shia state, which is not. Which it is not. It is, on one hand, it is secular state. On another hand, it is, of course, a Muslim state, but not very well-shaped denominations. And especially now they have, you know, slow transition from Shia Islam towards Sunni Islam because Shia is Iran and Sunni is Turkey in this case.
I was going to say, Iran is going to be very happy to hear the news of a Shia mosque being destroyed. Thank you, Hrant, for joining us today. Appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjan.
That was our Week in Review, recorded on November 24, 2025. We've been talking with Hrant Mikaelian, who is a political scientist and multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. As always, we want to call on everyone to subscribe to our channel. And yeah, a lot of people that we are finding are watching our shows are not even subscribed. They get it through the YouTube algorithms and stuff like that. So please subscribe to our channel. Your numbers help us. And like our shows, share our shows, put it in front of new eyes so that those people come into our community as well. And comment on our shows. We read the comments and we participate in the comments. And if you are able to, go ahead and become a sustaining member. Go to podcasts.groong.org/donates and pick either Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. You can give once, or as we prefer, become a sustaining member and give monthly.
Yeah, I have to say, Asped, last time I was in LA, I mean, just a few weeks ago, I think we saw a market difference in recognition. I don't want to say we have celebrity status in the Armenian community, but definitely I felt more people approaching us and recognizing us, which is good. I mean, our viewership is still minuscule, and I think that within the Armenian community, that is related to the sort of wide sense of apathy and post-war, PTSD that people and disillusionment with Armenia, unfortunately. And our goal is to change that. But whenever we have an international guest, we have tens of thousands of views, which is welcome. And we're hoping that by bringing international guests on our show, we can also help, pop up in front of Armenian eyes more frequently. And yeah, I want to thank all my friends. I used to complain every time I went to LA that none of my friends were watching the podcast, but Lou, if you're watching, I wanna recognize you because you have been, one of my friends who has been watching or listening to us from the first day. So thank you for that. But many more of my friends are now like watching this podcast. So I wanna shout out to them, and if they're listening, I want to say hi.
Well, because I mentioned I had a similar experience yesterday. Generally, nobody realizes that we are a podcast and we're talking about it. So sometimes when you see 1,000 or even 10,000 views, you're surprised when nobody's ever heard of you. But last night I was at a function here in Glendale, and a friend approached me and said he's a listener of our podcast, and he particularly picked on Pietro Shakarian's recent podcast with us where he talked about the publication of his book on Anastas Migoyan. And he said,
Oh, this one.
yeah, that one. That's right behind you. Excellent. And he said that not only had he liked that show, but that show had made a difference for him in researching how his family, his grandparents moved from the Middle East to the Soviet Union. And then, of course, his parents have left the Soviet Union and he's now here. But that was very interesting. He actually went in search of Migoyan's famous speech in 1954. And I was just amazed. So that's why I texted you and Pietro this morning, and Pietro woke up and said basically that made his day. It was amazing. So that was a great experience. Thank you for listening to us, folks. Okay, well, I'm Asbet Bedrosyan in Los Angeles, and I know from that book behind you that you are now back in Yerevan, Hovik.
Yeah, and if I can just leave on a positive note this time, I want to share something else that's on my bookshelf. This is, by the way, the books I'm currently reading and the books that are some of the most valuable ones that I frequently refer to. But on my bookshelf, I have this mini statuette of an angel blowing a trumpet. You might recognize this from the Ghazan Chechos Cathedral in Shushi, and it has a very powerful symbolic meaning for Armenians, and to me especially, because I was at a protest and out of the blue, this Artsakh gentleman came up to me and he said, "I noticed you carrying this flag, so I wanted to give this to you. It is honestly the most cherished possession of mine. And if you know anything about the eschatology, to me, this angel represents a call to service, service to God, a service to our nation, our homeland, and our community. It is also a reminder that we need a newfound commitment to rebuild Armenia. Just like this cathedral in Ghazan the angel statues were destroyed multiple times and rebuilt, especially in the 1920 massacres of Armenians in Shushi. I think so shall we commit to rebuilding Shushi and the cathedral in it one day. And this is for me an ever-present reminder of my own duty and the reason why I do this podcast and the reason why I thank you for listening to us. And hopefully you can do more than just listen, whether it's taking action in your way, becoming an activist in your way, or supporting us, like Asbet said, which is, liking, commenting, sharing, and donating.
I wonder what happened to that fellow after all of what's happened in Artsakh in the last 3-4 years, the full ethnic cleansing in 2023.
Well, it was post 2023, so they were already displaced. But yeah, we know that many Artsakhi's are being deliberately pushed away from Armenia by this regime. But I'm hoping, and if the person, whoever gave this to me, I want to thank them out of the bottom of my heart, because it has become my newfound treasure.
All right. We will talk to you next week, folks. Stay tuned.
Take care, guys.